Hi everybody, welcome to Face It and Fix It. We welcome our viewers in Barbados and across the world to another edition, Monday edition of Face It and Fix It on CBC TV 8, YouTube, and of course, Facebook. Hope you had a great weekend. I did somewhat, but what's on my mind? Last week, Tuesday, I was a guest on Let's Talk About It on 100.7 QFM. I joined Kimberly Skeet. We had a great conversation and a lot of callers and a lot of new callers on the show. And the topic more or less went in the direction of housing. And I spoke about connecting with the radio station, that particular radio station, 100.7 QFM rather, and we want to share information. So some people will call that show in the mornings, and Kimberly will be sharing some of the information here and sharing your concerns on this show, and we'll do vice versa. But that particular morning, housing was the issue, and we spoke about the assistance that we will be giving through this program. I know we mentioned it before, but earlier on in the year we had an election, a lot of different things happening. So we pulled everything together, and shortly we will be starting that assistance, that program, or promotion rather. We will be assisting 2 families and 2 homes. We will repair each home up to $10,000. And we got a great response, and we haven't even started yet, but I just want to clarify a few things. I got a lot of calls after that show and a lot of messages, and we did not say that we're giving away houses. I wish we could. Lord knows I wish we could. And maybe one day we will. But for now, we will assist 2 families. The promotion will start soon. And when you hear it, then you will know what to do and how to apply for a chance at getting an opportunity to have your home repaired. But we did say on the radio station that it has to be fully wood or predominantly wood and wall, and you have to live in it, and it must be yours. And of course, you will then get further details through this show and the radio stations across CBC as to how you can enter. So I love all of you for calling me, messaging me. I really enjoyed reading and the messages. I really could not respond to all. My phone blew up during that show and after that show, but I want to let you know, stay tuned to CBC TV 8 and the radio stations of CBC, and we will give you the details as to how 2 lucky families will get an opportunity to have their homes repaired up to $10,000 each. So let's take it easy, listen out, and we will share that information. So I just needed to clear the air on that. So who do we have today? Excited because she was my former colleague at another radio station, and she's now joining me here on the show. She is Senior Lecturer and Head of Department of Government Sociology, Social Work and Psychology, UWI, none other than Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS, former Commonwealthian. And it is my pleasure to actually have a discussion with her today, because she is going to share her views. And you know, Dr. HINDS is, she's very open. She holds nothing back, and she speaks her mind, of course, always in a respectful way. We also have another Commonwealthian joining us, Jeremy Stevens, financial consultant, and later on we'll also be joined by Dr. George Brathwaite. We want to discuss the economy, we want to simplify it, we want to know all of these different changes and big words that we hear, sometimes lost in translation. If people can explain what does that mean to the average person, the shop owner, the vendor, unemployment, all of these things are issues, burning issues that are impacting the lives of Barbadians. Of course, they may want to touch on what's happening in Grenada and elections and why people why was it called so quickly. Dr. HINDS may want to touch on that, but certainly we really want to focus on how can we fix some of the problems in Barbados. What is government doing? What are we doing? Are we doing our part? Can we do better? I always believe that we can. I personally never ask for perfection. I just ask for people to do better, all of us. Remember, you can call us 228-5563, or 228-5562, or you can send us a WhatsApp message, 228-5562. And if you're joining us via social media, Facebook to be exact, you can type in CBC Barbados, find us there, and leave your comments, and we will share them with everybody. When we get back, Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. It is my pleasure to introduce none other than Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS to Face It and Fix It. Welcome, welcome, Dr. HINDS.
Thank you.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought I get to interview you? For those of you who may not know, we used to work together, colleagues on another station, Brass Stacks to be exact. I believe that you're still moderating there from time to time. Is that correct? So
yes, I am.
Yes, and at some point it was just KRISTINA and myself, just the girls against the guys back then. And I believe there are only two girls right now, actually, still. Mm-hmm. But I know that you constantly, you know, listening to you then and even now, you know, we remember people like Dennis, for example, who guided us. And I just want to take a second to remember him, because when you came on, the first person that came to my mind, and I know you were coming on, was Dennis. I know he would be proud, seriously proud of you. So let's get started now. We know we've got a lot of issues, and I know that a lot of issues are also shared with you. What are some of the issues that you're hearing right now that people are really concerned about?
Cost of living, for sure. I don't think there is any way we can get around how expensive it is becoming to live in Barbados. It's always been an expensive place to live, but with these increases we've seen in fuel prices that are really affecting every area of life, every commercial operation, people's ability to pay bills, I think that is a critical one. And this is then compounded by this war that we are seeing between Russia and the Ukraine that has increased prices of other commodities, such as grain, which is having implications for farmers. So cost of living is a really serious issue, and it will affect everyone. It in particular affects those who are on fixed incomes. Pensioners, for instance, will really find it difficult to deal with this. Those who are already existing on the margins of society will find this very difficult. And then we've also heard from people operating in the transportation sector, taxi drivers, PSV drivers, for instance, who may be finding it difficult as well to deal with these increasing costs while not either wanting to or being able to raise their fares because of the implications it will have for regular people. I think this is a significant issue and one that needs to be addressed by the government, really, because that is the only entity I think that can intervene to try and mitigate these rising prices and the effects for regular Barbadians.
So how can they, though, if they're saying, look, all of these outside issues are creating this problem? I remember, I don't know if you remember, Tony Marshall used to be a moderator too. And one of the things I remember him saying all the time is taxes at the port, all of the different duties at the port. Is that something that government has, well, they have control over that, obviously. Is that something that they can make some adjustments so that we are somewhat cushioned?
They can make adjustments, but there are trade-offs that they will need to make in the process because the government has to also consider its revenue needs. So one of the things that has been done already from the last budget was the removal of VAT from fuel. And while that is okay, it provided a level of cushion for a short time period and perhaps still does. I think the more significant tax to address with fuel would be the excise tax. And I note, for instance, that St. Vincent and the Grenadines has reduced their excise tax as a way of cushioning the blow of these increased fuel prices. We can't control the prices of fuel on international markets, but we can control the tax. This can also be done on a temporary basis rather than being a permanent fix, perhaps to address the current difficulties. So it could be put in place for a period of time, let's say a year, 8 months, and then reviewed after that point. But I do think there are things that government can do on the tax side. But even while I say so, I recognize that it is a difficult balance that they have to strike because the government still needs to collect revenue to ensure that it can provide us with the services that it is supposed to provide. It can deal with other things that need to be fixed, like roads and schools and all sorts of things.
So even though we say government, obviously in order to get revenue so we can pay our police officers, teachers, etc., healthcare, we need that. So even if people say to me, and I always say, people say, well, look, the sewage and garbage tax, let's take that as an example. Even if the government takes that off and they decide to put a tax now on a health tax and increase that, it's like a trade-off. But would you agree with me that most of the whole economy and everything is about psychology? Because if I put the tax on to the hospital and said, listen, we got to improve healthcare, we recognize that everybody's not using sewage and so on and so forth, move it from there and switch it to there, mentally, you feel like, you know what, that's justified. Even though nobody wins, if you understand what I mean, because it moves from one hand to the next. Isn't that really what it is about taxes? Do we really actually remove anything?
I think there are more effective ways to tax. Maybe you can take this up with Jeremy when he comes on. But I do think that there are some better ways that we can perhaps approach taxation so that people are able to live, because this is a critical thing. Right now, there are people who will find themselves in situations where they will have little choice but to go to the welfare office. And Bajans have a lot of pride, and some people are reluctant to do this. My understanding is that those persons who work in this office are already overworked and overwhelmed because of the pandemic and the hardship that this has caused many persons. So as much as we talk about not wanting to reduce taxes because we need this revenue to pay for things, having this high cost of living will also potentially increase the cost of providing welfare services. So I think that one of the things that we may want to consider, and I'm not saying that the government is not considering this because I'm not privy to this information, but I think we could perhaps rely a bit more on the sales taxes, so VAT and so on, and maybe reduce some of the other taxes on imports, things such as the excise tax, as I've mentioned. And perhaps then people will be able to purchase more. They will have more spending power. They'll be able to purchase more in the economy, and we will gain some tax revenue by way of VAT, for instance. And, you know, people will be a little bit less, I hope a lot less dependent on things like having to go to the welfare office. And, you know, this kind of turns the welfare office into a voucher system. rather than perhaps doing some of the really critical work that needs to be done in assessing what is wrong in different households and communities, dealing with some serious problems that we have, issues like child abuse, domestic violence, other forms of abuse that occur within households and communities. So, if there's so much emphasis placed on just helping people to survive, giving out vouchers and hampers, there are other areas of welfare that may be neglected. And I think that this is indeed connected to being able to tax better, to tax in a way that ensures that those who are particularly vulnerable are not really living in a situation where they cannot afford to do anything else but to go to the
To
welfare
the welfare
office.
department. But
Yeah,
that brings
yeah.
me now to the subject of unemployment. We need then we need for the welfare to work system, because there's, something called welfare to work. I don't think that you were supposed to have people on welfare for the rest of their lives, and they're supposed to find ways and means to get them off, so that when somebody else comes into the system, it doesn't clog it up, because you would have moved 10 up to a job, 10 more coming, you move those up. How can the government address this high unemployment? No fault of theirs in a lot of ways, because of COVID and all of the other issues that we have around the world. But how can we address this?
Well, there are some jobs available. I have seen that there are jobs available in the tourism sector, for instance. I understand that there are construction projects that are expected to begin, so these things can open up some employment opportunities. There are other things that we may need to face, as your program says, such as perhaps some of the conditions in some of these areas, the conditions in the tourism sector. I've heard some tourism workers who are not particularly pleased with how they believe they were treated during the pandemic, and perhaps this serves as a disincentive for people to be engaged in this form of employment. That is not necessarily something that the government needs to deal with, but those who work in tourism need to really focus on how they are treating their workers. Are they valuable to them, or are they treating them as disposable entities that, when there are people in the country, they keep them, and when they're not, they dispose of them? That is not the best way to attract persons into a sector who are going to deliver a level of service that we would want. Construction also, we may have some concerns over how people who work in construction are treated, the rights that are afforded to them. So these are some areas of concern, but I would really want us to focus on sustainable employment too, rather than employment that is so kind of moody. So it depends on the whims of tourists. If they're going to come, then we have jobs. If we have some issue, then the jobs dry up. If you have a construction project, then there are jobs. If construction projects kind of dry up, then people are back in unemployment. So we need to have some kind of sustainability in jobs. I think also the same issue of cost of living, because there are some people who may look at some jobs that are available and ask themselves if it is even worth it. Because by the time you finish paying the bus fare and you get this small money, you can't really do anything with it. It may be just as costly to go to work as to stay home. So again, I really do think that cost of living is a crucial issue for us to address. It is an issue that I think we need to address too, because of things like crime. And perhaps when people feel like there's no other option, they're living in situations of desperation and marginality, they may resort to other ways of trying to live in a very expensive place. Some of the job issues, I think, have to do with the private sector, not just the government, because the government does provide quite a bit of employment and probably may want to provide less employment. So what areas in the private sector can we find viable and sustainable forms of employment for people? And then also, when we think about cost of living, there are individuals like you and I that may want to employ people. We may want to have a gardener, a babysitter, housekeeper, but when we see these increases in the cost of living, we are less able to do so because we have less disposable income, and that means there are also less jobs to go around. So I don't think there is any way we can get around focusing on how critical it is to contain how expensive it is to exist in Barbados.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break, but coming up, I want to ask you about how people are treated in the workplace, because you mentioned that, and people feel that, they're not being appreciated, and then we have all of these issues, and then we have union issues. I have a problem with how do we get to a union when we have HR departments? What happens there? So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. If you are now joining us, we are speaking with Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS, Head of Department and Senior Lecturer, Department of Government, Sociology, Social Work and Psychology, UWI. It's very long, but she has a very important role in this country. And again, I don't think I did congratulate you on being senator publicly, but let me take this opportunity to say congratulations. Now, before the break,
Thank you.
I know, and you know, because I've worked in government before, and people always talk about with more money. Okay, that's one issue, but then the way they're treated, some people don't feel valued, and and then it obviously reflects in the work, and then it impacts the bottom line. So it's not only about money; it's about their mental health and being able to produce. So here we have unions. And then we hear all of these different news, breaking news, this body strikes, and this body calls the union, and all this stuff. I'm just trying to figure out where are the HR departments in all of this confusion? How does it get to the union just like that, and all of a sudden it makes the news? I mean, I don't know if you have any additional information you'd want to say to us, that if there was a breakdown, if there is a breakdown in communication, or even understanding the labor laws, because I'm thinking you're HR director, manager, what happened?
Well, I'm not an industrial relations specialist in any way. I can talk from being a worker about some of the things that we experience that can be disheartening. And perhaps it is that there are some HR departments that may be more focused on the needs of the business or the corporate entity than they are on the employees. Not that people are necessarily bad people, but their eyes are focused somewhere other than the employee. So that may be one thing. Another thing may be that some businesses may not have HR departments. So there are businesses that operate without HR. So there are employees, and then there's management, and there is not a whole lot in between there. Unions do have very valuable roles to play. I know that people tend to focus on unions when it is these big issues, but my experience is that unions are also quite helpful when there may be some lower level issues that individual employees may be facing with regards to their employer. And sometimes the union is able to step in on a particular matter and help to have that ironed out to ensure that procedures are followed so that persons are not unfairly dismissed or disciplined for things that they should not be. So I think there's a lot that we need to do in Barbados. The assumption that every business has an HR department, I think, is a flawed one. Perhaps it is the larger corporate entities in Barbados that have these, but many businesses don't. And when we talk about entrepreneurship, there's a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurial activity and small businesses. Most of these businesses will not have HR departments, and it really is quite a big ask for some of the employers to be experts on industrial relations while they're also trying to start up their businesses. So, I mean, they should get to know as much as they can because they're employing people when they become entrepreneurs, but it also means that unions have a role to play outside of the one that we generally think of, which is wage and salary negotiations, and perhaps when we
a wrongful
see
dismissal
strike action
or something like that. And again, as I said, I know they play an important role. I'm not saying different. I'm just confused as to how it gets there, because even in the absence of an HR department or even a director, there are basic labor laws that you can go to the labor office and ask a question, even as an employer, if you're not sure. But you go ahead and you do all these different bad things, and then you see all over Facebook or somewhere that, you know, this person was treated with this disrespect, whether it's a big organization or small, and then the union has to jump in. So I'm just wondering if there are labor laws that are read or interpreted different for the union and interpreted different for HR, because there's a constant clash. We may not hear about everything, but trust me, well, the position you are in and I'm in, we don't necessarily get everything out on the air either. We get a lot of information coming to us, things that are happening in various organizations and concerns. So it was just, I'm saying that apart from the cost of living, I find that the mental health of people trying to carry out their duties, whether it's government or private, means a lot in terms of the bottom line, in terms of getting through. It's not only just the money aspect, it's the functions. All right, but I want to move on to some other questions that some people may be having for you. And I know you're a senator. If there's one thing that you can think of, that we talked about societal issues, but one of your pet projects, if you want to say that, you know, as a senator, you want to put on the front burner, because, you know, I know you fight for a lot of different things. Is there something in a general sense that you see as an issue, not society's issues as well, but something that Dr. Haigh sees as, look, we need to really do something about this?
I think we need greater levels of accountability. And so here I'm talking about the public sector as well as the government in general. I would love for us to be in a position where we have access to information about public business, where the general public, those who are interested in finding out about something, can find out about it without having to call and beg, or maybe you have to know someone, or you have to have some kind of expert research knowledge to gain information on particular issues. And this ranges from legislation, from being able to access legislation so that maybe you don't understand the labor laws. How can you find this easily? And also the information that is current, because sometimes the information that we are able to access from the government is dated itself. So I would love that. I would love freedom of information legislation in Barbados that allows people to access public information as a right, not that they're begging someone or they're waiting for the information to be made available, or somebody can't find a file. When you have this legislation, there is a requirement that says that you are supposed to be provided with the information that you request once it is not a state secret for security purposes within a specified time period. So that means that even if there are issues on the government side or in a particular agency or ministry with accessing the information, they have to find it for you within a certain time frame, let's say a 3-month time period. And this will allow us to hold governments to account. It will allow us to understand how certain things have occurred, why they have occurred, and maybe to raise some questions about the ways in which particular matters, our matters, are conducted. And everybody's not going to be engaged in this. This will only be those who are genuinely interested in specific issues. But I think we should be able to find the information that we need about how the country is run. And this is in every area, whether we're talking about healthcare, transportation, housing, as you mentioned. People may still have some big questions about these houses that were supposed to have been provided and about the holdup that we are seeing. So we are told particular things, which is fine. And nobody is saying that what we are told is incorrect. But some of us may want to double check. So that we should have the ability to go and find the documents to verify that what we are being told and what we are seeing in the newspapers, on the radio, what we hear and what we see on the television, that these things are accurate and it is not spin or half truth or something that is being used for other purposes, right? So I would love to see more information, greater levels of transparency, and I would love for people to be genuinely included in more processes and not just be provided information at a press conference and that to be viewed as public inclusion, because that is not inclusion. That is, you provide information as a one-way situation. You provide information, but there is not a lot of ability for persons to engage with that information, and not just in a critical way. People also have a lot of ideas. That's one thing I have heard from being on Brass Tacks. People have a lot of ideas and things that they would like to offer. But when we have this kind of one-way system, it is difficult for those ideas to get through, to even be considered, so that we can see if there is any value in implementing some of them.
Now, here's where I agree with you in part, and we can disagree. I think Peter Wickham and myself will probably have the same position. I voted for you to get in. I need you to make decisions on the behalf of the country. At what point do you say, let's go to referendum for this, but let's not do it for that? Let's do it, let's speak more on, there are issues that require buy-in, but you and I both know that buy-in just is a good word for saying, I tell one, but I still doing what we have to do. No one does a referendum to tell us that let's see how people feel about taxes, let's see how people feel about the sewage and the garbage tax, or, they don't. They make the decisions. Why is it then am I asking the government to weigh in all the time for the opinions of everybody? And don't get me wrong, communication is important and we must listen to the people. But at what point, how do we decide what goes out there, or they decide what goes out there for referendum and opinions and what doesn't?
Well, referendum is different. So we're not talking about referenda for everything. That would be very costly. It would be quite unwieldy as well. But there are a lot of things that require public input and perhaps input from particular sectors. And what my work has indicated that we tend to do this very late in the process, and this is how we end up with poor decision making. So for instance, you want to do something in the education system, and it is amazing to me that there are things that are being done within the education system. For instance, the removal of the common entrance and the movement towards some kind of system in which there are middle schools, and the average teacher you talk to cannot tell you anything about it. That to me is not making sense. It doesn't mean that the teachers have to be involved in every single step of the process, but certainly they should be engaged in a way that allows them to offer their input and also to be kept abreast of whatever is happening or is proposed in this system, and relatively early in the system too, because you don't want it to be that you have implemented something in September of this year when the school year begins. And when you implement it, you butt up on some problems that perhaps could have been avoided if the people who were responsible for implementing were included at an earlier stage. This is not going to get rid of all problems, because whenever you do something new, there will be teething problems, but it can assist with something. People think differently. So when you include those who are the users or who are responsible for implementing earlier on, you may come up with some ideas and some perspectives that you, the person that came up with a strategy or whatever, did not necessarily think of, that can help you to do this better, and can also help those who are supposed to implement to make changes when they need to, because they don't feel alienated from the process. So
Well,
you have people who will
Here,
feel
here's
in
a
the same
caller who may
process.
caller on the line. There's a caller on the line who may want to weigh in and have an opinion on what you're saying. We just welcome that caller quickly. Good morning.
Sure, go
Face
ahead.
it and fix it.
Hello.
Yes, good morning. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if I'm on the right. Is this on air?
Yes, you are.
No, I don't think I want it.
Okay, you don't want to be. That's the problem. Sometimes we have people feel that because they're calling TV that they're on TV. They're not on TV. We can hear them, but that's okay. Let's continue. Hopefully, the person would another person would call back. But the whole thing is what you're saying is I understand, but being a moderator back then and even a host now, I'm saying that people sometimes will get information and some people will never say is enough. That's one. Sometimes you will hear the government never said anything, but then you look back, there was a press release. Okay, we look at it and we go like, all right, you know what, that ain't enough. They need to do and I agree, they need to do a bit more. But you would hear then, like unions, for example, teachers, you would just hear there was a big meeting and comes out and this buddy says meeting went well. 2 days later, something happens. You hear, we weren't told about it. And I'm like, but you just had a meeting. So there's some breakdown somehow in not only the communication and possibly maybe the interpretation. I'm not picking up for government, but we all must agree that they talk a lot more than
Yeah, but
previous.
talking is one thing, right? So you can talk to obfuscate, or you can talk to really inform. You can also talk in a way that is seeking to ensure that your message gets to the people that it needs to get to, but not in a one way kind of system. And I think sometimes that is what happens. So what am I saying here? Participation is a process. Participation is not offering just a press release and done with that, right? So that people say, well, I didn't get the information. You say, well, they had a press release or they had a meeting. Participation is a process. So when we're talking about things such as, I was using the example of education, I think there should be processes, ongoing processes, and everybody is not going to be involved. We know there's always going to be some miserable person that says something, that is going to say something that is not fully accurate. We cannot get rid of that in life. But what we can do is to make the processes available so that those who want to be engaged and who genuinely want to assist in a process can do so. And this can help to guard against having people working in an area who really feel like, I don't really care because the government can do what they want to do. I could have told them this before, but they didn't even ask us, right? So I think that the more that we can engage in, and these processes are not easy, they're costly in terms of people's time and energy from the public sector side. So I can understand why there is not a lot of enthusiasm around them. But we may also be able to avoid some difficulties that we get into with policy implementation. We always hear about, not just in Barbados, but in Caribbean community, about an implementation deficit. And sometimes these implementation problems have to do with lack of communication. And I don't even necessarily just mean with those outside of government. This can even be inside of government, where there are plans set up to do something in a particular time period without really consulting the internal users, as sometimes I believe they're called, who will be critical for ensuring that this policy works. So I think we need to have a lot more of that. And to be fair to the government, I think there are efforts afoot to try this, but it is not just about having a meeting or providing information. I think it really is a cultural shift that we need to see within the government, the public sector, the government as in the elected members and thereafter, but also a shift in us so that we don't just expect that we voted for them, so then go decide. Yes, they should decide, and they can make some determinations on the point at which we engage people, perhaps the kinds of issues that we engage on, but this should be something that is regularized and not something that we are so excited because the government held a consultation. This should be
Well,
part of
I
the
honestly
regular
would love to
functions.
see the day that any government would consult us and said, you know what, I'm thinking about raising taxes. Let's have a discussion. We don't get that. You know, they do what they have to do with the budgets. But the lady who had called, actually, she was saying that she wanted you to weigh in on agriculture. And yes. So what are your thoughts? Where are we with agriculture? If you have that information, because I can tell you now, and Barbadians, and producer may be a little shocked, but we do have Green Climate Fund, which is 5Cs, talking about climate change every 2 weeks. And we're looking at backyard planting and everything. And you tune in this Friday, we are starting back. Well, I should say, when I say starting back, not on the show, I gave away a lot of fruit trees in 2020 through NCC at that time. But I'm bringing it back to the show. So we want to encourage backyard farming. So we're going to give away a lot of fruit trees and vegetable herbs from this Friday coming. So that individual lady said, look, y'all touching on everything, she said, but when they ain't touch agriculture.
Okay.
I wanted you to weigh in a little bit. Well, food security, you know, what we're doing, what government is doing.
Need this. I can't say with 100% of certainty what government is doing. I know there are efforts, as you said, to try and encourage agriculture, to encourage people to grow some of their own at home. This can help to insulate them as well with cost of living issues. We still do have quite a bit of emphasis on sugar. And this is something that those with an interest in agriculture, I think, need to weigh in on. Are we doing the correct things with regards to the sugar industry? And then in terms of feeding ourselves, are we converting too much of our agricultural land into housing? Are we using it for other purposes? What is the willingness of not just young people, but young people and others to become engaged in agriculture? And how can you be willing to do this when we have this perennial problem of theft, predial larceny, which definitely needs to be taken seriously if we are going to encourage agriculture? We have the issue too of imported foods that can also perhaps dissuade those who are involved in farming from what they're doing. So what is the sense of me growing carrots and bringing them to market or carrying them to the supermarket, and then they cannot compete with imported carrots? So I do think we have some serious agricultural issues to address. I'm not an expert in the area, but
yeah, I know.
I would love to see this being taken a
Mr.
lot more
Agriculture
seriously.
then is not here to help us out. Mr. Agriculture, who calls you? There's a quick caller though, somebody, because I know you got to wrap up soon. In a few minutes. Good morning.
Hi, good morning to you, Joyanne.
Good morning.
How are you this morning, ma'am?
I'm good.
Right. This is the first time I've spoken to you for a while, but you're still my favorite presenter, but because I find you to be so sincere and down to earth, I do admire those qualities.
Why, I thank you, and I'm also in the company with a person who shares the same traits. Go ahead. Caller? Did we lose that caller? All right, we lost the caller. So we got to wrap up now. we gotta wrap up now. We're just hearing the producer in my ears about, you know how this goes, Dr. Hinds.
You didn't even get to ask me about the election in Grenada.
No, because I want to. But I want you.
Kitts.
No, we were told, the producer is saying we do, because we're going to give you a minute or two to talk about that. Because I asked the question this morning to the producer, how does that impact Barbados? You know, that type of thing. I want to know the connection and what lessons learned type of things, and why would they have called it. So tell me about it. Tell us about it.
I don't think it doesn't affect Barbados, but it does show us something about our political processes in the region. So this ability to quickly call an election, and Grenada has a similar situation to ours, where we have a government that has all of the seats as well. So it is something to look at and to really question, is this the way that we want to see the countries of the region governed? Should we be able to call snap elections in this way? Are these things that going forward, when we're supposed to have a process of constitutional reform, that we want to have addressed in Barbados so that they do not continue to happen in ways that can be detrimental to democracy? There's also supposed to be an election in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that is really interesting to follow too, because there was a no confidence motion in this country. And instead of there being a change in the prime minister, so this harkens back to our past in Barbados, although it's slightly different, the particulars, an election was called. So these are the sorts of things that I think we should, especially people like myself who are involved in politics as political scientists, political analysts, and so on, we should really think about these and how we want to govern ourselves in Barbados and the region. Are we doing things that are good for the citizens and the residents, or are we doing things that serve the acquisition of political power by political parties and political aspirants? These two things are not necessarily aligned, and our political system should serve the public and not just political parties.
All right, well, another caller, but I wanted to ask you about set terms, but we'll take this call quickly. Good morning, Face It and Fix It, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Am I there?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I want to say something that is very relevant to the society. And I always like to talk to scientists and those people who generally criticize governance. I'm not saying this affect governance to mean all to the governance in Barbados. Let me tell you, I like to talk to scientists and those people who generally criticize governance. I'm not saying this affect governance to mean all to the governance in Barbados. Let me tell you, stay away from you. I believe that these two governors in Barbados have done pretty well for this country to go abroad, pretty well. And there have been a lot of talk and controversy about the governance in Barbados. But one of the factors that the people who are criticizing has any answers, and what can they come and tell you that they would do different? They're just coming and talking, and they don't want to. It's a lot of people given a chance. Even the public that criticizes, what is their line of helping or doing things different? And a lot of them criticize, but they have no, as just criticize and say it. And I think that is a very worrisome state. This country have done pretty well in both the two political parties. I do, I'm a mature man. I think that the kind of things in this country that this country has that pays through the state for people is alarming. I was just talking to a man last week, he's a seaman, he went over Australia in this place, and he said, look, Barbados is a wonderful place. He said, look, the things that we have in this country pays over the state, a lot of countries they have it. You understand? And I think that the criticism goes on sometimes. I want to ask the people who have this criticism, if they have any answers, if they can bring the facts, what they can, how they will do different, but just talk. There's a lot of talk by the public and talk by people, both private sector, both the private sector, the governments that attack and say, I think they have to bring their facts. When they're coming on this program and all these things, they should bring their facts. Tell you what they would do different. I don't know tell you what they would do different, just come and criticize. And that's why I'm something about. I'm well read, Skipper, my friend. I got 50, I'm well read with everything. I will get into everything, international and everything, I'm well read. Now you understand. What is their facts and their condemnation of these things? What they would do, how they would do, how they would put in place? And when you can tell me that, I go with you. Everything a government do, that can be right.
Well, that is true. There's not everything with government that can be right, but your response to that, because I have an issue with anybody who pulls down anything. And when I asked them what do they think should happen, they go like, well, I know I really think about it. Then you really shouldn't really pull it down. But your thoughts?
But can I respond?
Yes.
Well, I think that, I don't know if this person is speaking about me or generally.
Generally.
I do think there are people that have ideas that they would wish to share. So at the beginning of the program, I talked about reducing the excise tax. I noted that there are other countries that have done this. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has done this. I'm not saying we have to reduce it to that level, but perhaps to a level that can offer people an ease. I believe it is in excess of 30 cents per liter. We pay an excise tax on fuel, gasoline in particular. So that is something that I think we can look at to help. It will not fix the issue fully, but it will at least ameliorate the situation that people face. With respect to governance, as I was talking about participation, I do actually have a lot of ideas. I have written a whole book that talks about participation of civil society in governance, and it does lay out both the extent to which the populations across the region are generally included in governance processes. It shows that there is some inclusion and that this has increased over time, but it is still often quite late stage. So my view is that we can integrate this more and more in earlier stages of policy making so that we can create better policy. And we see this, we're starting to see this in some areas such as youth policy, but we really have to go the full way. So we cannot just have the consultation at the early phase of policy creation and not continually have it as part of the evaluation of how policy is going. So these are some things that, some firm prescriptions that I have for how we can do things better. I do not have firm prescriptions in some of the areas such as agriculture because I do not know sufficient, but in those areas I have them. And when it comes to things such as Joanne was asking, things like term limits, I do have some ideas on this. I do not think we should be in the practice of having snap elections. I don't think they are productive for democracy. I don't think they're productive for the running of individual countries. And my view is that we should have a time before which elections cannot be called. And this will allow for all political parties involved to know that they have at least X period to prepare themselves for an election, right? And so that no gimmicks and tricks can be used. So if we say that this set period is 3.5 years, a government cannot call an election before 3.5 years have passed unless there is some extraordinary situation. It doesn't have to be 3.5 years, but that is an option. There are some people that believe in term limits. I think that is an option too, but my preference is to have something that combines the two, right? A limit, but still some flexibility depending on how things are going in individual countries. So that is, those are my firm prescriptions that are based on a level of research and knowledge and not just complaints about how things are happening. We can complain, but we can also offer some alternatives.
Well, I remember when you wrote that book, but I never got a copy, so I would like to buy one because you kind of leave it at Starcom Network at reception. And I will leave my little package to get. And in closing, because I know you have to run, for me, and I would love to do this with you, I think the deficit, as you said, is implementation, but I'm trying to see how best I can marry communication and implementation, because people write a lot. They put all, there's a meeting on a meeting and another meeting on a meeting, and then all this paperwork, and nobody knows, some people don't know, or key people don't know, how to take that information off that paper and run with it. They just don't. It just fails a lot, and that's why we don't get things implemented in the way that we should. And I think that government should spend a little bit more time showing people how to implement, because that's where the deficit is, in my opinion. I am going to leave 1 minute wrap up. I want to thank you, but I'm going to leave you the final word, as Peter would always say, final word at you, and then we have to take off. Final word.
I just really want to thank you for inviting me. It really is a pleasure to be on a program with you, because I've never had the opportunity before, and to use this medium is quite a pleasure to be on television. I hope I look okay, because I'm accustomed to just being on radio. You look fantastic. I love the new hairdo. Thank you. I do hope that people have heard from this, though, that at least from my end, coming out of the University of the West Indies, people do not just have criticisms. We also have quite a few ideas, strategies that we can offer. And I think it's just a matter of getting this message across to the relevant persons, both those in the public, so that they know that we're not just at the university teaching and collecting a big salary, that we do think about these things, and also to those who are responsible for policy implementation and policy making, that we are doing work on these areas. Just call on us and we can help to try and fix it and face it.
Thank you so much. Good note to end on, and please don't forget, leave a copy of the book at Starcom Network. I will be buying it. I'm looking forward to at least collecting it by later this week. Thank you so much, Dr. Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you too.
We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. Our next guest will be Jeremy Stevens. He's a financial consultant. A lot of you can, you normally catch Jeremy doing a live on Facebook, and he always talks about the economy. He is a Commonwealthian, and I guess I had to mention that, and he'll be joining us soon. But in the meantime, I want to thank Senator Dr. KRISTINA HINDS for taking the time to share that information with us. And I do encourage you, when we get a copy of the book, I'm going to share it here to encourage you to go out and get your copy. During the break, again, we got some messages about housing. I got some messages about housing, and to the lady in Green Hill, again, we will reach out to you. You know who you are because you said you're watching the program, and she's got a problem with her house, and she's requesting some assistance. She has the materials, and she just needs labor. Speaking to people over the last couple of days, people are just asking for some help. Sometimes they don't need the full thing. Sometimes they have the materials and they just need labor, and sometimes they don't have anything and they're starting from scratch. But whatever we can do, we certainly will assist. We have Jeremy Stevens. He's joining us via telephone. Good morning, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Jeremy Stevens. Jeremy Stephen. I made that error like everybody else does on Facebook. You have to keep correcting all the time and telling people no S, not the end.
Yeah.
My apologies. I should know
doing,
better.
Glenn?
Say again?
How you doing? How you doing? You good?
I'm good. Looking at this handsome picture of you on the screen.
Recent picture.
You sent in a nice one, or we chose that one?
Oh no, the media doesn't choose my pictures well. I had to send it in.
Oh, okay. Well, nice choice. Jeremy, you always break down things in layman terms, and this is why we all love you. But we not liking the taxes and the cost of living. We worried, and we don't know if there's anything we can do. So I'm asking you that, now that you know that the taxes, we all know that on the rise, does high taxation really solve the problem down the road, or does it make it worse for the average Barbadian?
Well, that's a double-edged sword in terms of a question, because high taxation is normally a product of, well, I guess an ideology to begin with. And it's interesting you had KRISTINA on just before me, because she and I would probably agree very strongly on this. It's ideological first and foremost. And let me explain why. Because in the terms of Barbados, and I heard you guys talking about St. Vincent and the excise taxes and how they were able to at least offer at ease there. Barbados is pretty much built on this ideology of we want to have a good social safety net for all. That was something that was introduced by Barrow and to this day still maintains, even through the reintroduction of free education up to the tertiary level. And to have a social safety net for a small open economy which doesn't have any form of competitive exports, we don't even compete when it comes to tourism. Frankly, when you have a cost, well, your major cost being education, roughly about 10 to 15% of the government budget expenditure on an annual basis goes into education, then followed by healthcare. You would expect that that government over time would try to finance those expenditures via its tax revenue, or it would have to borrow. And for the longest time, I tell people pretty much since I was in secondary school, the year that I'm really aware of is probably 1998 to know, Barbados has, until about 2018, sorry, survived on borrowing money, survived on its good name. And you have a choice when you have an unproductive or a relatively low productive and competitive economy. You either compete or you focus on industries where you have a price advantage and a reputation, or you end up borrowing money or taxing your way towards providing those sorts of services that you need. The Barbadian economy is rather simple. I mean, it's simple. We are the size of a small town, so there's no unknown factor that can surprise us overnight and it turns around, let's say, our ability to raise our own finance and our ability to pay for our children straight from nursery all the way up to university level. Like, there's nothing that can surprise you. So pretty much, you know, high taxation does not mean that you lend yourself to an economy that will fall to overtime, nor does it mean that it improves the economy. You have examples such as this isn't the best example based on regionalism, but the Scandinavian countries, high tax jurisdictions, and their economies grow, albeit anemically in some cases. And Scandinavian countries would be Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, and Norway. But when you look at how they manage the economy, they compete very heavily either in innovation in the form of Sweden or oil in the form of Norway and Finland on the innovation, and Denmark is a mixture of both. You know, these places are small by population, but they compete rather heavily, but they have the unfair advantage of being tied to a region, that being the Eurozone. So it's not the best example, but they're high tax jurisdictions. Here, the head of IKEA, for instance, lives in Switzerland so he could avoid, not evade, I wouldn't want to cast aspersions on it, but avoid high taxation that he's expected to have in Sweden. So, like, the question, that's why I said, is a double-edged sword. I really don't look at the issue as being that of taxation. Taxation is a product of our ideology first and foremost, and what we have to do is to re-examine our ideologies if we wish to change things in our country.
That because of COVID and tourism was the only thing that we more or less depended on, and we took a big hit and there was nothing else. There's no sugar to really do anything much. I believe the rum industry probably was the only other thing that was bringing in some sort of additional income. What is it that government can look to? We talked about it, we talked straight, we talked about things like marijuana and farms for medicinal purposes. Do you think turning to things like that can give us a little boost in the economy if we concentrate on those types of things?
All right. Well, you might be asking me for my personal opinion, but let me make sure I set a platform for us to have that discussion, right? And that platform is this: the industries that you spoke of, with the exception of tourism, are what you would call sunset industries. We are no longer competitive in any of them. And just because of infrastructure and legacy, we still partake in them. Sugar has not since, really, since I was 5 or 6 years old, that would be 1990, 1991. Well, sorry, 1989, 1990. Sugar has not been responsible for more than 10% of our gross domestic product, so our income in any given year. So the amount of support the sugar industry would have gotten, even up to this case where it represents, agriculture is 5% in general of GDP, so it represents even less of that proportion and has been depleted over time. We've wasted a very good opportunity to probably even embark in high value agriculture using the land space that is dedicated to sugar. I wouldn't even go as far as to say renewable energy per se in terms of ethanol-based production, but maybe even having converted them to solar farms way back would have helped us now be able to balance our energy costs as opposed to us now only finding our way some 10 years after the renewable energy or legislation had become more amenable for the average Bayesian to partake in it, right, under the Democratic Labour Party. So I say that to say that a lot of the sunset industries had time, sufficient time to, in my view, to innovate. Tourism, for instance, I mean, I'm glad now that the government somewhat recognized a call to arms. That I'm not saying directly recognize that call to arms, but I was out speaking about the Middle East being one of our saviors for tourism since 10 years ago, and also
And
Asia
now we have a
pushed back
consulate
on
there, an
this.
embassy there.
Yeah, but pushed back then, and I mean, shucks, I was in my 20s at the time, so it's not that long ago. So it's fresh in my mind where the pushback would be. Oh, these people won't travel that far, and I'm thinking, now the evidence shows in Jamaica where they pivoted somewhat towards tourism out of the Far East, not even the Middle East, but the Far East. And that sustained their economy when they had the oil crisis back in the mid-2000s stuff like, right? So I'm thinking that we had more than enough evidence out there to pivot what we do have for those who are listening, who believe, well, this is our bread and butter, this is where we need to go. In terms of agriculture, I heard the discussion earlier speak to it. You would have had the case where there are arguments that we should focus more, not so much so on cottage industries within agriculture, but more so high value, low volume production outside the spices and look more at supplying the domestic market. While anything that we grow that we don't have a competitive advantage in, you probably grow that down in Suriname or Guyana. Belize. All right, and this is again, some of my friends from school days would know that's a model I supported in terms of us investing a significant resources. At the time I thought Guyana, I'm not so much sold as I used to be on it, and using that for export, to supplement our own. You can import the excess supply into Barbados. You ship out the mine and the management, which happens to reside here now to help manage that. And yes, you bring in whatever and it supplements our demand. I mean, there are industries such as transshipment, if it is that we're looking at reducing our cost of living or at least maintaining it, that could help supplement or help us in times like this where, the issue for me isn't our exports are expensive per se on their own, or the prices are likely to go through the roof because of global shortages and the war in Ukraine. But rather that for everything that we import, we don't have a export or dollar exported that matches. So we basically pay for containers twice. We pay for the importation and then the ship that returns to pick up more stuff. So transshipment, which is like a 25-year industry, to bring it to the point where Barbados can be a world leader in it because of where we're located. That's not spoken to in a serious way from a strategic point of view. But 25 years from now, maybe y'all are still young like you, Diana, kicking. That could be an industry that allows us not to have that argument long term where, like, when we do inevitably reach another recession of this type. So, and I haven't even touched cannabis, and I was intricately involved in terms of guiding the Medicinal Cannabis Authority locally. And I believe there are opportunities there once we could fully integrate that with some health tourism, A, and B, transshipment, right? So those are things that cannot be easily replaced given our location and our climate. So like there are a number of industries out here. I haven't even spoken to IT, I haven't even spoken to international business. I haven't even spoken to the metaverse, which seemingly is not spoken to much in the media any longer. But there are a number of industries we can look at and then look back at our ideology, our economic ideology, and say what can we be competitive in long term, what would allow us to control our pricing, what would allow us to make sufficient cash flow from export opportunities that would help us in the future to hedge meaning to minimize this volatility or these high prices that Barbadians pay year on year that are out of the reach or growing at such a pace that is out of the reach of the average Barbadian year on year. This is 15 years that salaries have not matched in terms of the rate of increase in prices, inflation. Salary increases have not matched, not for the 10 years that people have been talking about it, but in real terms, 15 to 17 years that the average Barbadian has not been able to keep up with inflation. Minimum. So, like, we have to think about it from a long term perspective.
This
That's
loses
my
a lot
position.
of Barbadians, though, Jeremy, the average person. When I say the average person right now, to the people in Fairchild Street, in the markets, the vendors, the guys on the corner there selling coconuts on a Sunday, you know, we explain and we know all these things on this big macro level, but a lot of people kind of asking, you know, like what to do, how are you
I
going to
don't
live?
believe it. I don't believe, and this is where me and a lot of people will come wrong. I don't believe the issue is that the small man is lost. Look, I spent 6 months out of the, well, 5 to 6 months in the US last year, right? Trying to finish up some, because I'm a commercial pilot now as well, right? So trying to finish up some training that I decided I wanted to do. And at that time, you had massive inflation even before what was going on. Now, you had massive people walking off the job because the Biden administration was pretty much supplementing people's living via, I guess, the payouts that they were doing is the best way to put it. And something that I noticed again is that most Americans, even though they may have a political opinion, do not understand how their economy works. But yet, it doesn't mean that the small corner shop person, I spent a lot of time fishing up there, the guy that owns the bait shop, it doesn't mean that he should be precluded from understanding what happens on the big stage because that matters to him. Frankly, anybody selling coconuts in Barbados right now who is killing it financially is living on borrowed time. Right, because the big part of the economy that provides the foreign exchange that allows whomever to import the machinery, the fuel, the machinery meant to cut or to sort the coconuts, to import some of the nuts, because some nuts do come through the port, to deal with the disposal of the trash, the coconut trash outside of the highway, to the bottles or the material that is meant to make the bottle, that is determined outside of their ability to do anything about it. Because number one, the market is small, and as a result, our markets have very limited options. You may spend some time if you recognize down the line that there's going to be massive inflation and don't shoot your foot or fool your foot. The Prime Minister could say whatever she wants to say regarding salaries, well, being able to adjust salaries, or I'm paraphrasing here, right? Adjust salaries, will not putting the economy in trouble. But the fact remains that there's a war in Ukraine that is affecting global supply because Ukraine is a global bread basket. So whatever happens there, inevitably, as long as there's a war, will affect Barbados no matter what policy they put in place. We do not produce anything of note. So it makes more sense to me, and this is why I try my best. I speak in a little more academically than I normally do, but this is why it makes more sense to me for people to have those conversations because it appears them. I think we're too caught unawares because of a refusal to understand the topics. And I don't mean you have to be an expert, right? You know there's a war going on in the Ukraine. You know that it's created global shortages because in the news this has been said over and over and over. We know that no war lasts less than a year because there's also a recovery period, right? And deals that have to be made in terms of lands being split or handed back over. That's going to affect supply. So therefore, if anybody's out there thinking, right, this is what I continue, even though I've left economics in a sense, to speak openly, and so that I can provide this guidance, and I'm doing it for free. So if anybody thinks this year, 2022, that there's going to be any reprieve in prices worldwide, that means you're purposely putting your head or burying your head down in the sand. You don't have to be an expert to understand this. And you as, because you put the average person over there, you as an average person are not a conglomerate. Neither is the average person a major stakeholder in our bread and butter industries such as financial services, tourism, and whatnot. Like these big things are, these big companies, the decisions are not being made by persons who would be considered average.
But that is true.
Even then,
That they're not being
right, and even
made. But this is where we gotta take a break. We're gonna take a break. But
Right.
when we come back, this now leads me into three things I want to talk about: greed, lack of vision, and bad policies, or should I say, in terms of taxes. That combination, in terms of how that contributes to the outcome of what we are seeing now, or what we saw over the years. When we come back after the break, more with Jeremy Stephen. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. If you are now joining us, we are speaking with Mr. Jeremy Stephen, financial consultant. A lot of you may know Jeremy from his little blogs, big blogs, that he would have on Facebook from time to time. UE University students, I'm sure you know, you would have passed through Jeremy Stephen, my apologies again, Jeremy. I'm always messing up your name, it seems. But before the break,
those same students do.
before the break, I want to know, and I know people talk about this a lot, that word greed, vision, or lack thereof, and leadership. What we see in the world, and everybody is talking about, this is what's happening outside, and you know, we have no control. But you have people on the outside where obviously exercise very poor judgment. We have world leaders that enter into war, an unnecessary war. We have world leaders sometimes that make very bad decisions that would impact small island states like us, like ours. I don't ever buy into the fact that this is just the way it is, there's a war. Somebody started the war. Somebody makes decisions about gas prices. Somebody makes a decision that I'm going to increase my prices because I may have a vaccine and the only one, you know, things like that. You know, that whole supply and demand, and people make decisions. How much is greed, lack of vision, and leadership contribute? How much does it contribute to the problems that people face as far as cost of living is concerned? Not just now, but throughout the ages.
I can answer this question by using an analogy that will show you that greed is a subjective thing. And I'm not defending it, but it will make sense. John, when you fill up your tank, because I assume you're still driving, right?
Yeah, for now.
Good. Let me not. Because
Knock on
nowadays
wood.
you can't make that assumption at all, you know? But yeah, so you're driving. You go and put as much fuel as you reasonably can given your particular situation. And let's say a not homeless person, let's say a bugged out person clearly out of their mind, you know, I'm not going to use the Beijing vernacular on public here, but you get what I mean. Somebody that's clearly older than money, probably highly coked up at this point in time, comes up to you and asks you for it, because they don't ask you for $1 anymore, asks you for $10. But this last $10 is the difference between you being able to have enough fuel to go and pick up, because I know you have a daughter, go and pick up your daughter from school so that she's not, let's assume that you're the only means of transportation and she didn't have bus fare that day, you know, and you are this $10 is the only thing that can get you to your daughter and make sure that her safety is in check. But on the flip side, that $10 could have been, because this guy could have been begging all day long, the difference between him, you know, dying from extreme starvation. What choice is the average person, or you, Joanne, more likely to make? You're going to make the choice that suits your best self-interest, because at that time, charity puts your daughter at risk. Essentially, every decision that is made on the world stage politically is done with that premise in mind. And that comes from, I would say, lack of a proper worldview more so than greed. All humans are by definition inherently greedy. We look after our self-interest first and foremost, right? This is why, for instance, believe it or not, this probably will make some people think I'm crazy myself. This is the reason why Caribbean people behave. It's less to do with every day, twice a day. It's less to do with hygiene than it is to do with the public's perception of you, right? So at the end of the day, political leaders are out there to deliver a certain set of results to who holds their best interests at heart. It starts there, fundamentally. Now, to expand, Barbados is a country, I think we need to have this reality, right? And this is why regionalism is so important, and why each individual country, especially in the Eastern Caribbean, really needs a reality check in face of what's happening now, because it can only get worse, okay? And more persistent over time. We are only 250,000 people on a good day. Some would argue 300,000 with illegal immigration, perhaps, right? On a good day. There is no town in Southeast Florida that is along the coastline, or no city that has that few people except for Miami. Most people think Doral is Miami, right? Fort Lauderdale even has more people than that. But yet, you see that those towns, because they're so connected and cities connected along a coastline, it looks as if they're much bigger, separate economies than they are. But they depend on each other very intricately, yeah? So I say this, the world does not care about an island that exists in the middle of the Atlantic with just 300,000 people and nothing that the world wants except for sun, sea, and sand. Then there are other persons with self-interest of being able to minimize their tax exposure. Like that's just how the world operates. It operates on self-interest. So like I learned a long time ago that morals are highly subjective and culturally biased. I would want the world to look at me and recognize me. This is the reason why, for instance, when Rihanna became a billionaire, every Bajan felt the need to say, oh, that's our girl, because for some reason it gives that validity to our existence. So, and I think the wrong way to look at it, I should be thinking,
and if she didn't succeed, or she did something and she wasn't a billionaire, Lord knows, it's kind of like Barack Obama being a black dad, white mom. If he had messed up, black people would be saying, so who voted for the half white guy? Exactly. But because he was whatever, he's ours, he's black. But we got some questions we got to get through here. Now you talked about population. I want to get into this whole possible brain drain that we might be seeing as a result of COVID. Recently, I'll tell you, as a result of COVID, job losses, due to job losses as well, job losses occurred because of COVID, and a lot of them did. And then recently we heard about cruise liners and jobs available in Canada, and job fairs happening outside for Canada and various liners, etc. Now, if that takes out a good chunk of our population, which is already small, what does that mean now for us? Because people are looking to greener pastures.
Well, look, it's worse than people think it is. Almost twice to 3 times a month, I'm saying goodbye to people that give Barbados their very best. And these are people ranging from the 40s, early 40s, all the way down to as young as you can think is necessary in the workforce.
So there is a brain drain for sure.
Hold on, there's a definite brain drain, but it's not even just Barbados alone. There's a brain drain in all small open economies that pretty much have been ravaged by COVID. Now, the world has been ravaged by COVID, mainly less so to do with the health repercussions. I might be seen as responsible for saying this, but it still kills more people. I'm not, however, COVID skeptic. But the shutdowns that have happened have really reorganized the world, and it's changed in developed countries, even how people perceive their value. And so you had great resignations, some return in the larger or the more developed economies. But that hasn't directly resulted in an opportunity for Caribbean persons to leave. So what is there? So in other words, there are less so pull factors. In other words, things happening out in those countries economically that are pulling people rather than what's pushing them away, which was our inability as small open economies to properly and fairly, I would say, weather the storm, because COVID did show up, in my anecdotal view, a lot of inequality that we basically swept under the rug. If you had skills during COVID, you had choices, and you always have choices if you had more marketable skills. So like if you were a person who had access to the internet and had access to computers and were knowledgeable in working with them, you had, even your children had a better advantage during COVID. So there's a lot of inequality that was even worsened across the Caribbean in general, even Jamaica, which has been doing well economically prior to COVID. And even during the first year, believe it or not, you know, it has pushed people into finding whatever is necessary, because the jobs that are available, the locals and the better skilled people who already reside in those developed countries will be just going right back into the workforce and taking up those jobs. So it's not like new jobs have become available. It's just old jobs that people will know, because the fiscal assistance that Biden and the Trudeau government would have been given during COVID, that's beginning to drop. So no, there are more push factors and pull factors, and I think the drain is significant, and people are double skilling. You know, persons who would work in quite some senior positions locally are willing to take that pay cut just not to be exposed to the inequality that's become glaring and apparent in our small open economies.
All right, so we have another WhatsApp here. I believe it's about productivity. I think it was shared on the screen. How is productivity measured in this WhatsApp? And the person is saying, I hear them mentioning in terms of increasing wages. So should we pay people more money to get productivity? Does that work?
I mean, look, that's such a complex. The question for that, the answer for that question is so complex. But I'll try my best to keep it tight, right? Productivity in general is measured by output per hour. And ideally, when a person is paid, you're paid based on the amount of time that you spend to produce something, to complete some set of tasks that would have been in your job description or when you meet with your bosses, right? Ideally. I think most Bajans break down their productivity by the month, but if you really, really, really want a good idea of how productive you are, you should really break it down by the hour, right? Every hour that I'm being paid to do something, what am I producing for this company? Most people who work in sales-driven jobs could find that easier because you can base it on your commissions and your wages and the hours that you put in. Persons who work in what you call call centers, so the administrative assistants, marketers, believe it or not, economists, and even anybody that does an analytical role, or even some IT persons, developers especially. You know, your job, our jobs are very tied to costs. So it's a little difficult to assess productivity compared to somebody who sells. But fundamentally, it comes down to what your output is, or if you've been achieving tasks within the timeline specified, and you should really be breaking it down by the hour, right? So the more productive a person is, ideally they're more efficient, which means they waste less time or they do more in any given specific time, all right? So every hour, if I can get more out of that person and pay them the same as the person who's doing less for each hour, that person is more productive than the other person. So what is said then in labor economics, ideally, I actually taught that at UE for a long time as well, is that the person who is more productive is the one more deserving of a raise. Now that is micro. Let's break down things on the micro level. Productivity at the national level is assumed, but it is closely tied to your gross domestic product and how that is growing year on year, right? Gross domestic product is tied to what you call total factor productivity. That's a complex issue, but fundamentally, if a country has a set amount of hours in every year, right? You have 52 weeks. I don't remember the amount of hours. I think it's what, 4,000. I can't remember. The math is leaving me now, but you have a set amount of hours in every year. If your income or your GDP is growing year by year, the country is therefore said to be more productive from a perspective, right? That's from a revenue perspective. So, long story being short, just to tie into the wage argument, you know, a business person, therefore, or business persons across the globe, or investors that look at countries and say, you know, that country's GDP is growing every year, I'm going to invest it. They're likely to pay you better based on competition for skills like yours, which means that your skills must not be easily acquired or easily found. So in other words, you need probably an advanced degree or advanced training, or there's a shortage of your type of skills in the market, right? Fundamentally. Then it is tied into how productive people in the industry typically are. If you're paying them just a fixed amount and they're more productive year on year, then you have a strong argument against employers to say, well, that person or these set of persons within your firm or within your company are deserving, or within an industry are deserving of a raise because there's clear evidence that shows they've been doing more and you've been keeping their labor costs the same, and you haven't been giving them other perks, you haven't been training them anymore, or you haven't been increasing your training budget, so you have profitability to spare. And that fundamentally is where the argument for wage increases should exist, right? Should. But in our economies, it doesn't exist that way. So the argument about time productivity to wages, in my view, has been convoluted. It can be simplified. There are only 300,000 people. That's the honest truth. We have very complex institutions, and that adds a layer of complexity to why we take so long to get things done, plus our attitude in general. But, you know, fundamentally, if you're doing more and have been doing more, as you have been out there in Barbados, speaking to you guys during COVID, then yeah, there's a solid argument for wanting more. The question is, if you've been doing more, but the company has been making less or sustaining or borrowing to finance you, then how then can an employer expect in this year we're borrowing Ukraine and all this, these shortages and price increases are going on globally, and I established earlier that we cannot do anything about that except, well, I will get on to what we can do. But
We can't. But Jeremy, I got one final question quickly, and I want to answer it as quickly as you can because we run out of time. Everybody in Barbados would like to know this. I would like to know it. People don't have any money, they want to know, or they got a little savings somewhere. What can they do? I'm going to ask is, one, should we bring back meet interns if that still happens for people to get involved in?
Joy, I know my position about meet interns. No.
Okay, and
no.
Or what about I'm saying like savings or bonds, or what can they invest their little savings? Somebody's at home, they said, you know what, I only got a little $1,000. Should I leave it on the bank and accumulate that small little savings, or should I buy bonds? Should I buy, you know, shares in something, renewable energy, light and power, you know, things like that they may be able to make extra money in a legitimate way, of course.
Legitimacy is the prime thing because of the scams that have been going around. All right, so I have to open what I'm saying by saying that this does not constitute any investment advice, but rather financial education. I cannot give investment advice, especially in this platform. So, I mean, look, the way you have to look at it, everybody first and foremost has to understand two things before they begin to invest, right? It has to start at the personal level. You have to understand how you behave in the face of huge risk or small risk. The likelihood of you losing your money or being guaranteed your money. That is a function, or that depends on how much money you have to lose that's available to be invested, and also your general attitude towards losing money, right? So that puts people really in 2 or 3 brackets. Low risk investors, persons with high risk that could wait years for the money to come back. So your age is also a factor you have to be cognizant of. And then in the middle, people who would probably put some money into things that there's a low likelihood of it returning, but if it does, it's really good. And then the rest probably in guaranteed investments. So you have to know who you are in that regard. And then any investment advice that you professionally try to acquire would make a little more sense. But I'll speak down the line in terms of what is out there that people could invest in. I mean, the Jamaicans, NCB, falling in the Jamaicans, have found the opportunity in buying government debt off of the average Barbadian, paying them a few cents on the dollar. This is a debt that was restructured back in 2018. You pay them a few cents, and then they take the money and they hold it long term. And they've been selling to the average person really access to those bonds, right? So that's an investment product. The likes of Sagicor and those guys now are putting out renewable energy bonds and renewable like a renewable energy mutual fund. You could put some money into it, and as these renewable energy projects make more money, which they will, all right, over time, and these projects are all across the region, you would make more money being invested in the likes of a Sagicor mutual fund or something, or the same NCB. So like that's one end. I always tell people too, it's a good thing to probably think about group economics and not in the form of a meat intern. I do not like meat interns.
You don't like me, even though we grew up hearing about meat interns, you don't like them.
No, it had its place, but for the time I started understanding money, every time my family tried to get me in one, I would tell them that I gotta miss me with that, because it is basically deferred spending. It's not investing. Right? Investing says that you put money into something productive, that it grows over time, because the time value of money concept, where if I decide to put my money aside in something, it has to do something, because if I had it in my pocket, I would have done something else with it. And you need to reward me for that patience, right? So if I'm getting back what I put in initially a few months down the line, all you're helping me do is defer my spending. But the joke is, as seen with inflation, right? Inflation does not wait. So if I put in $100 at the beginning of the term and then I'm expected to withdraw all the money, so 1,200 is 12 people in this term down the line, then what that $1,200 I'm getting down the line isn't worth the 1,200 a day. In fact, the person who withdraws from the medium term first is at an advantage at all times, right? Based on inflation. So I don't like them. However, I like the structure. What I would say, and I hope to God the average Bajan across many classes and many years listening, take that structure of a meeting term and put it together to buy food and essential items together. That makes more sense to me if you will use that deferred spending model. By bulk buying, by putting together your money, and hopefully you choose good managers that can find good deals. You can then skip supermarkets. I'm not trying to make supermarket people broke, because everybody is not going to follow my advice anyway. You can go to wholesalers. You can go to wholesalers.
I agree with you.
Take over, I'm sure.
I am so sorry we started this portion of this discussion late, at such a late stage, because we can definitely have to bring you back, but we can continue. And now here we have a little bit more time, so I want to expand on what you just said about bulk buying. Let's take the markets in Fairchild Street, for example, the new markets, and I know the vendors listen and things like that. Would it not make more sense for, if you have 30, 40 food stalls and you're all selling pork, you're all selling soft drinks, and you're selling rum, that everybody gets together and buy in bulk to push down the price, so that they're all good. Thank you. Want to hear it from you? Want to hear it from you? Because I ain't the economist.
but no,
Go
it
ahead.
don't have to be in the context. Like we already see the benefits of well, I mean, most black pages might not get this in theory just because of our culture, right? But a lot of other cultures on the island understand the power of telling somebody, actually we do, but mainly, and this might sound very condescending, but in my impression, and this is because of how I grew up in the village and whatnot, when it's time to go and drink beers. We understand if I bring a bunch of men to a rum shop, more than likely the fellow, the bartender or the owner, the proprietor would drop the cost of each beer because, well, you want the
got
drinks
enough
out
people.
because consignment, right? They got on consignment. So like we understand it from that fragment in terms of being able to get cheap beers, but we don't do it when it comes to getting something vital like other nutritious forms of foods. And furthermore, from a business aspect, we find it difficult to structure like the Fairchild Street people should. I think they had an attempt at it before. Have a co-op. The co-op should be doing the negotiation with the buyers. The co-op would obviously, if I am to offer any advice, who puts in more into the co-op in terms of investment to start it up should be getting the bulk or getting more commensurate to the proportion of money they put in. So based on how much you put in, you're able to get more of whatever product. That's fair, and everybody benefits from these prices and also a stronger lobbying effort. If we have more of these cooperatives around, the government generally will be more willing to listen as well to look at who gets the conversations with government and therefore able to put across what affects them. Wisdom has many cooperatives in a sense and lobby groups. That's why then, if a tax hits the industry too hard, they're able to have a voice and, since the Prime Minister seems to listen, in my view, seems to listen, then she might listen and then act, as Minister of Finance. So like these are some of the on the ground measures that can help us and culturally we must return to going forward. I haven't even spoken about what government could do, but government follows its people. I think in Barbados we get it wrong with respect to that we need to follow the government. No, we need to lead them in a direction, and we got to put these measures in place personally. And one of the best measures, in my view, is the whole idea of group economics. About that, you have to do it. Like, that's the only way.
Let me ask you about this one. I mean, I said earlier in the show that this Friday, hopefully, we normally have the discussions on climate change, and we're bringing back some backyard farming, and we have it here, but we want to put it on the front burner. If we live in a, say, neighborhood like 10, 15 houses, and everybody sort of repurposed the garbage can that they had to get rid of, plant some trees, or just do some vegetables, should we in the neighborhood say, listen, I doing a little bit of parsley up the road, you doing some sweet peppers. People don't trade anymore. Barter is a bad name, or we sell it to each other maybe if we wanted to. Could we still barter?
I'm fine about yes, we do. I mean, I see it every day. Bajans, that's something that black Bajans do. We do barter. The problem is that I don't think either side feels they get a fair deal out of it. Right? But
so because I give you my parsley and you give me 10 carrots, the value clearly is not the same. So
but I mean the parsley ain't get spoiled. Right?
The carrots not in the hurry neither.
Well, if you keep them frozen long enough, depending on the type of carrot too. So I don't think both sides ever feel that they get a fair deal in the long run when you barter. That's why cash is an important medium, right? Money is an important medium of exchange. But, I mean, shucks up. Let's take the whole kitchen garden concept a bit further. I mean, well, right now might not be optimal time, but during COVID, there was an emphasis going in this direction. I thought it would have been sustained. Where, like, the average person, in fact, somebody could organize this. I sure as hell won't be doing it.
What?
Not.
What's that?
But it is worthwhile. What I'm about to say. So, it would be worthwhile. I think in each community, rum shops are actually the best places to organize this thing. I don't want any politicians involved in it, to be true. Where you can go and lease a set of land. A lot of Guyanese immigrants do this locally. You lease a set of semi-barren land, and as a community, everybody invests every month into the property, the provision of materials, fertilizers. You try to build up the right infrastructure for the water because that's the most critical. You pay money probably for security, a security or somebody, or you can revolve. Like each person in the community gets a certain amount of time watching the land, especially if you're unemployed. You take a little bit of money together, 200 people, 100 people, and you grow what you need. But the key catch is you don't pay people to pick the vegetables or the fruit. You do it yourself. And you do it, and then you have somebody wait, and it's based on your monthly contribution into the business. Now you do that for certain specialty items, stuff like parsley, onions, whatever the case may be. And the good thing is that most of the stuff you're talking about here is seasonal, right? So you do it based on season, and you then get to rest the land as a result. A few months of one particular crop, then you rotate it. That helps the land to be more productive long term. And a lot of these sugarcane, a whole set of communities should be approaching these plantations right now, especially the ones that are struggling, the ones connected to the old BA and C structure that is always there, and say, hey, we want you to clear out a section of land, let me grow this stuff here, release that stuff in particular. But you do it as a community group as opposed to individual farmers.
But that sounds like a really good idea, Jeremy, and I'm hoping that somebody pick us up.
I've been given too many ideas for too many years.
Well, be honest with you, might not wait that far, but I could tell you, and perhaps we will send you some trees to Jeremy for being a guest on our show if you're interested. You know, we have mango. Oh, no. Let's let the public know that in a few days, hopefully, well, we're looking to give away mango, Suriname cherry, golden apple, guava, sugar apple, and soursop. But we're also looking at the dwarf trees, which, by the way, people go crazy over because you don't have to wait until they grow, you know, that height, and you're able to get fruit or, you know, faster. But I really think that your concept, or even this concept about planting in communities, and if barter don't work, well, if you planting carrots and you tell your neighbor, well, I can plant cucumber and you plant something, perhaps you can buy each other's vegetables in between.
And the thing is, right, Joya, I actually believe that fundamentally business have the ability to organize and to be sort of capitalist, well, be social about these initiatives. Because, I mean, the scam that was happening for the last year thereabouts, I've even forgotten the name, although I blasted it online. Oh my gosh. I'm forgetting the name of it, right? But there's a lot of these financial scams that take communities. I don't know why I'm forgetting the name. It's probably a good thing I've forgotten.
You mean one of the meet interns?
Blessing circles.
Okay.
Blessing circles. No. I don't call meet interns a scam. I just think that they're mispurposed.
Okay. Pyramid? Or, yeah, okay.
Pyramid schemes. I don't see a meet intern as that, but blessing circle is. And it requires a lot of structure. It requires, in most cases, or in all cases, this is where blessing circles feel, good financial management. But the point is that it shows me that businesses are willing to organize, even if it's for financial gain. So we have the capacity. It is not beyond us as a people to organize and organize rather quickly. We just need to be clear about what it's for.
But why we can't seem to get it right for most things? I mean, I don't know. I mean, everybody always says, well, if this was done by the Indian businessmen or the Jews, or they get together, they buy in bulk, they share, and then people say, but you're okay with black people? People say, look, we have a problem where we can't seem to pull together to get it done. But you did a classic example. It can be done.
Because it can be done, regardless of where we are. It's just about understanding what motivates different communities. Look, I have a friend of mine who's a Muslim Indian here in Barbados. I won't reveal who he is. And he and I have very frank discussions, especially about race, right? Very frank. And something that he said to me that he's an older man, right? Much older. And something he said to me really, really hit me for six about 2-3 months ago. He said to me, Jeremy, what do you think my father always thought I should be? And I said, I don't know. Tell me, a doctor? He said, nah, a businessman. In fact, when he went studying to be a doctor, he was disappointed. Right? and when I think about what pertains in black households to this day, if you tell somebody you want to be a businessman, they're more accepting. But if you tell somebody you want to be a doctor, that even propels you further, right? So my thing is this. I think we need to understand for each part of our community, and the ideas are here. I mean, I know it. I just won't say it at this point. What motivates each of us? Once you can hit those pain points, people will organize. I just think we need to stop thinking of putting ourselves in this barrel, no pun intended, that says we can only do this, right? And it's there. It's been proven time and time again that businesses of all classes and trades can organize businesses and successful in some cases, but in many cases, um, popular is the best way to go here. Popular business ideas that may or may not work. So, like, I believe the potential is there to do these kind of organizations. I believe that it should not be government led. It can't be government promoting it would ideally, or not ideally, will doom it to, it has to be community driven, and then government has to follow and subsidize or assist. Government leading it will include will create political conditions where then the community is different communities will benefit differently, especially if it's centralized in government. I believe the Ministry of Agriculture shouldn't even lead it. It has to start from the community, and the community comes and says, "We've done this. This is our problem. This is how you can help us exactly." Then government can get involved. Otherwise, it will fail. Whatever I'm saying here right now, it will fail. The government never got involved in blessing circles, and it's still around, although people have been losing money.
It's
I
still
mean,
around?
it's still around. There's at least one more around, and I can't understand why it's still there. Probably Rose in the studio would know. Okay.
Okay. Listen, we're going to come back after the break, Jeremy, because I got one quick question from someone who just messaged me and asked me about what's the sense of buying a home in this day and age. Is it better to rent? But we will answer that
All right.
after the break. Welcome back to Face It and Fix It. We are speaking with Jeremy Stephen, financial consultant. Jeremy, we got like a 1 minute, 30 seconds to wrap up. And we had a quick question about companies being bought in Barbados from outside companies and in Trinidad with Collins. What does that mean? But see if you can, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and I don't know if you can wrap up.
That's a 20 second. That's a 20-second answer. I guess you don't want to deal with the question about real estate anymore.
I do too. If you can do more.
All right, well, quick. So I don't get why Bajans feel the need to want to protect or get angry when companies locally are bought from outside companies when, we haven't shown the willingness to invest even in the stock market or even to create consortium groups to go and buy shares in these things. Like these transactions are fairly simple. I myself have gotten involved in. In fact, I always reveal this. I am a shareholder of Massey and Hanson McCall and Prestige Holdings. So these businesses that have significant presences in Barbados, I am a shareholder, right? So continue shopping at Massey. But the point being is like it doesn't matter where a business comes from. What matters is who is in control of those businesses. And those businesses, for the main point, are public businesses. Mostly. You could, if you want to make a stand or make a point, invest in those same businesses in their own home countries. As a CARICOM citizen, that is relatively easy to do. Right?
Why it's important for people like you. This is why it's important for people like you even to come back on these shows. I wanted the average person listening to you right now say, look, Jeremy, how I could buy a couple little shares in Massey? Well, I only got a $500. What I could do?
Buy a mutual fund. There's Fortress and all of them goods. When you invest in them, just need $100 to invest. You are a shareholder through them in the likes of, not legally you're not, but you are a shareholder in a sense of Massey and Hanson McCall and them if you're poor. Like we just got to understand there are options locally that allows you to take a stand if you're rich or poor.
30 seconds about the house. Should someone buy a home in this day and age or just continue to rent?
A home is probably the largest investment that most people make in their lives. Homes, as owners, tend to run a larger expense than most people plan for. And I think when people are looking at buying a home, they don't assume what the maintenance costs are going to be. What you should do if you're going to make that decision to buy a home is to know that you can afford to maintain it. If you do, then it's a great long-term investment. Otherwise, it's going to be a hole in your pocket, and your children probably won't live there and sell it off. Rent is never a great it's not an investment unless you're taking any savings you get from renting and putting it into some asset that grows faster than real estate. That's really the options. Don't you mind?
All right. Well, we got to wrap up there. Jeremy, I would love to have you back because there's so many questions that people have, especially in this day and age. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us as you normally do in layman's terms. Thank you.
No problem. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Well, that's it for Face It and Fix It on CBC TV 8, YouTube, and Facebook. I want to thank our guests. I hope you learned something. Please tune in on Friday, Green Climate Fund Fridays, when we talk about climate change. And hopefully then we will be able to give away these wonderful trees because we want to make sure that there's some sort of level of food security discussion as we talk about climate change and various things that we need to do in order to protect ourselves and to help ourselves. As we know, in a couple of weeks, it's hurricane season, and we have to prepare ourselves for that. I'm Joanne Haigh. This has been Face It and Fix It. I will see you this Friday.